So, hey, good morning again. I'm going to have you pull out your worship folder real quick. There's just a couple announcements we want to let you know about that is taking place here. First of all, again, if you notice here under the prayer requests and praise buzz section, there's a message written on there that if you would like to have your prayer request or whatever may be your thought, whatever, shared with everyone, to please add your name to it and put it in there and mark that you want that. We're really wanting to make sure that if we have something we want people to pray for, we get it out there. But we also respect privacy, and we're never really sure when somebody puts a prayer request in here if they want it shared or not unless they mark it. We don't want to put it out if you don't want it out there. So just want to remind you, we have these communication cards in here. If you would fill those out for us, that'd be great. Like I said, if you have a prayer request, a praise, a thought, or whatever, and you want it shared or however you want it done, make sure you mark that and just leave it in the box on your way as you go. In fact, if you tend to forget to leave it in the box and you're one that gets home and goes, I forgot to do it, you can fill it out and go put it in now. I won't care if you get up and go put it in now. But we just want to make sure we're staying as communicated as possible through this because we're about ready to get back into a lot more flow of things going on. School started this week. That means practices started this week, which means activities start this week in sports. And they picked the best week of the year to start tennis and cross country and football and all these outdoor sports as we get into the 100 and some degree days, which in a month we'll be complaining because we'll be wearing sweatshirts and it'll be too cold. But for now, it's all started. Things are going to get busy. And part of that start means we're also going to start Wednesday nights soon. It's always the first Wednesday after Labor Day. We'll be starting that. So I know that Craig is reaching out to those that taught last year, and just to make sure and try and gather to make sure we're ready to go. If there's some that are interested in being a part of that this year, see Craig, write it on the card, do something. You know, we have a lot of young people that show up on Wednesday nights, and I know that sometimes we have these ideas about how crazy our young people are, and they're true. They are crazy, but they're fun to be with them and to spend an evening with them and to speak into their lives. And so I'm looking forward to it because a lot of them moving up to the high school, getting to spend time with them, have some good discussion with them, but there's many other age levels that we're reaching to. The other thing is that means an opportunity to make meals has started again. We want to do it. It worked well last year, so they've already started the list here of those that might want to take a meal on a certain night, and we'll pass this around. But I do know that those that show up, one thing they look forward to is getting to eat, and they know they're going to get a good meal because we got a lot of good cooks. And so we're going to pass this around and give you an opportunity on that too. But also those of you that are parents of high schoolers or those that are going to be in high school next year. So an 8th grader this year all the way through those that are in high school, we're going to start also getting the word out more because we got to start preparing and raising funds. But next summer is the International Youth Convention in Orlando. That's an opportunity to go with about 4,000 other high schoolers, spend some time together, worship, and then obviously we're going to probably hit up a theme park and we're going to do a service project. It's a fun trip, but it comes every 2 years for the International Youth Convention. It's in Orlando, and we're going to start finding out who's going to be able to go on that trip next summer so we can start the fundraising. So you're going to be hearing a lot about that as well. So like I said, if you have an 8th grader this year, one that'll be going into high school or in high school right now, that's who this is open to. So these are things that are coming up. We'll start getting that word out. It's going to get going. So enjoy this moment if you have young people because life's about to change. The rest of you that your young people are gone, it's just going to get cooler for you. Nothing else will change. Okay, it's going to be life as we move forward, but you'll see some more activity going on around. So I just want to keep you informed of that. Also, I want to let you know we're going to start a little series today. I'll get into it here in a minute. But there's going to be kind of a hit and miss. You know, Labor Day is coming up, and Labor Day is Labor Day, where who knows what's going to happen with Labor Day. But we got next week, we got Labor Day. And then on the 10th of September, we got a special treat. If you remember, during Craig's ordination, a man by the name of Clint McBroom came here and spoke. He is currently not pastoring. He's working at the Central Community Church in Wichita. He's actually in a transition process of figuring out, what God is going to be doing with him in his future, in his life. And so I saw him yesterday at the conference. He's a good friend of mine, got to talk to him, and just had this idea of our series that we were in finding God's call for us in our demonstration project and what he's leading us to, and then just looking forward to that and continuing on that for a while. He's in a place where he is seeking that out for now. And I said, what? And he'll be straightforward with you, and so will I. He's struggling with it. He's trying to find, this is a guy who's been a pastor for many years, and he's struggling with what's next. And I said, because I'll be gone, the guy that I've shared with you before, my uncle, pastor, mentor, passed away. So I'll be in Oregon helping do that funeral during that time. And he's going to come share with you on that day. And I just encourage you guys to come. If you don't remember who he is, remember he's the fiery redhead. And he'll share with you, and it'll be worth being here. So mark September 10th, the Sunday after Labor Day, on your calendar to be here as a part of that. Great guy, and I'm glad he's willing to come just share his journey to help us as we process our own, as we continue to look at, what's our project? What is it that God is calling us into? That being said, that's why I want to go into this little kind of take a break out of, if you would open to Matthew chapter 23 for me. And if you notice, you might be going 23. We just got done with 10. That's jumping ahead 13 chapters in Matthew. We're going to do that for a few weeks because there's something no longer. There's been a number of things that have happened. You've already probably felt it a little bit in the messages that we shared through the summer as we looked at Jesus calling in to send out moment with his disciples. The challenge for us to look for our demonstration projects as individuals, but also as a church, which we're not letting that go. That's going to get more intense here in the next few weeks and months as we move forward. You probably notice something in me that there's just something that I just feel like there's something. We just got to get going. We cannot just be sitting around. And then last weekend, dropping our son off at college at Mid-America and just experiencing the environment there. And I told him the day we took a walk that morning before we went and moved him in, and I was just feeling very strongly. I said, Caden, this is not just you getting to go to school somewhere. God is doing something in your life, the way that this all worked out, and I don't know what it is, but my challenge to him was to engage because I believe God was doing something. He's taking him out of his comfort zone and putting him somewhere where there's something bigger going on. And that started stirring in me again because it just reminded me that's happening for all of us in different ways, that God is trying to do something in us and through us. So that took place. I'll share with you later, I had an awkward conversation with a girl at Best Buy trying to return some of his stuff that struck a chord in me that made me realize that, hey, we've only got so much time. We've got to, what are we going to do with it? And all these things kept coming together, and it just keeps building in me the need for us to be who we're called to be as followers of Jesus and as the church, and not to just settle in. Not to just live comfortably for the rest of our lives, not to just, all the things that we desire to do. There's just something that's been stirring because there's something going on. And it's going to feel like there's something really negative going on for quite a while because we're just going into seasons where it's going to feel that way. But overall, there is something going on. So all this has been stirring. And then one day, actually, I was coming home from junior high camp. Was it just junior high? Camp. It's not junior high camp. Coming home from camp, summer camp from Nebraska, getting to bring all these young, and it was all young ladies home from that camp in the van. They were not allowed to have their phones while they're at camp. And so some of them actually leave it behind before they ever even get in the van. They just leave it at home. They don't take a chance. They go. But while they're there, they're not allowed to have it. Now, we encourage not to necessarily have it in the van, but we're not going to say, thou shalt not have the phone in the van before or after. So some do, some don't. But for the most part, they leave them behind. But they went through the camp. We went and picked them up. We were coming home, and my daughter was sitting next to me. And one of the first things she asked me was whether or not I brought her phone when we got there. And just because I am a loving dad that cares about my daughter, I lied to her and said, no, I didn't. Well, I had it sitting in my bag right here the whole time. Because I thought the first thing you're asking out of camp is for your phone. No, I did not bring your phone. But I actually needed her to look some stuff up, so I knew eventually I was going to have to come forward and tell her the truth and repent and everything else and go to confession for lying to my daughter. But for the moment, I was telling her no. We drove for a while, got to a point where I needed her to actually look something up. Obviously, I couldn't look at my own phone and do stuff while I'm driving a bunch of students home. So I pulled out her phone. I handed it to her. I faced the retribution for lying to her. She got after me, for tricking her and not having that. And she got her phone, and she wanted to actually start looking, putting together pictures that they had that people were passing around from all the others from camp. And she was doing that for a while, and she was putting them together. But as you know how it happens with them, they say they're going to do one thing. Before you know it, they're on there for quite a while. And I'm not just saying kids. I'm talking about anybody with their phone. So we can't just sit here and blame these on young people. We all get caught in it, where it was scrolling. And then all of a sudden, she randomly just goes, click. I'm like, what was that? Like, why did you just do that? She goes, well, it's the notification just came in. Like, notification, like, for what? She goes, for the BeReal app. The notification to BeReal just came in. I was like, you're driving in a van, and all of a sudden, you just took a picture. And she says, yeah, it's the app I have. And I don't know if you've seen it, but there's an app that has taken this place by storm called BeReal that's out there. And I was like, well, that's kind of interesting. I asked a little bit more about it. It says it takes a picture of a front picture and utilizes as a back camera. And what it is, I think it's French-based, and it's to fight against the fakeness of social media, where people were staging photos. I mean, nobody does that, right? I mean, everything you see on Facebook is exactly how life went that day, where you just got done yelling at the kids, and hey, good job. And then you're back to going on. Like, you actually see people that actually are fluffing their hair and retaking pictures for Facebook and stuff. But this is supposed to fight against that. And what happens is, apparently, again, some of these young people can probably tell me if I'm getting it right, but at some random time in the day, they receive a notification. And they have 2 minutes to respond to that notification, to take a picture of whatever they're doing at that moment, wherever they're at, without getting to stage it and put it out there. And then those that are part of it in a network or something get to see what they're really doing on that day, so that they can see that life is not just always glamorous and fancy, because they were noticing that the pressure of creating these photos, the pressure of seeing everybody else's photos and having to live up to other people's photos, was actually adding more stress and anxiety in young people, because they're feeling pressure to live up to what they were seeing. I would say it's doing it for adults as well, but that's usually where they do their studies, is for young people. So they're trying to fight against this thing where they put out this app, and kids were taking it by storm. They had such a desire to get past all the fake and to get through that, whether they knew it or not, that I think they said there was over 40. I have an article actually that told me when this one was written. I can't remember how many downloads it was now. I want to say it was over 40 million, but that doesn't even seem like enough. In no time that came out, because people had such a desire to see and to be real, and amongst all the fakeness that's going on. And it just really, for some reason, that just continued to wear on me. That just continued to hit me, that there's, in what we call the secular world, in this culture that we rail against all the time, in this thing that we're just always so upset with, we're being reminded that there is this desire for realness. Ironically, people are still staging photos, and they learn how to get around it, and if they wait so long, they can wait till something more interesting is going on, yada, yada, yada. And some people were complaining because they said the notification can come in at inopportune times, like when you're watching a movie, when you're doing something else. Someone said even during a funeral, somebody clicked the picture because it was during the funeral, and that's what they were doing, to be real. So there were still people who were angry with it. But the whole thing that struck me was this whole thing about being real. I thought there is such a desire for realness. And so I thought, okay, as we're going to go out and we're going to be called in to go out and do this demonstration project that has our purpose for which we're to live out, to help carry on the revolution that started over 2,000 years ago, the question I thought for us today that I want us just to process is, when God calls us, when he sends that notification, when he puts us in the path of somebody that we get to be a follower of him, we get to actually live out what we've been called in to learn and understand. That moment comes, God calls us in to send us out, and that opportunity to share and to give and to do and to be is presented. Will we be genuine and real? Or are we going to use that opportunity, or even maybe say, wait, I need to wait for a pose. I need to be able to get into a posture and a pose that makes this life with Jesus seem more unattainable and harder for everyone else who sees it. Like, where are we when that happens? When our opportunity comes, are we real? or not? Because we're going to live this out and we're going to carry this on. I think God's calling us to be real. In many ways, he created the app way before this fringe company ever created an app. When that notification comes, he's just saying, I just want you to be real in your relationship with me. He's wanted his followers to be real. He's wanted those that represented him to be real. Matthew 23, I want you to see this. There's a few times in Scripture where Jesus seems irritated. There's a few times in Scripture where he almost seems angry. Where he's just, most of the time we see Jesus, he is gentle, he is loving, he is caring, he is patient, he is gracious, he is all these things we desire, but sometimes he gets irritated. It just seems like he's frustrated. And he shares words that are almost like, oh my goodness, I can't believe he said that. This is one of those times. In Matthew chapter 23, starting in verse 1, we won't read all of it, and I just want you to hear the heart. I want you to hear the theme that is behind this right here. It says, Jesus said to the crowds and to his disciples, the teachers of the law and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. So you must be careful to do everything they tell you, but do not do what they do, for they do not practice what they preach. Now, just a second. Who is he talking about right here? Those people? The crooked politicians? The person that we don't get along with at work? The teacher that keeps getting at the person I'm upset? Who is he talking about here? Who is he calling out? The teachers of the law. The Pharisees. The religious. We've heard this so much that we've just almost become immune to it. We're just kind of like, yeah, whatever. Jesus got most irritated and upset and frustrated with those who said that they represented him and weren't doing it the way that he was calling them to represent him. When he got upset, it was not with the people that we get upset with who didn't believe him and know him and understand him. They were acting like people who didn't know him, believe him, or understand him. He was upset with the ones that claimed to be the ones that represented him and weren't doing it the way that actually represented him. When he got upset, that's usually who he was getting after, and that's who he's calling out here. He says, they do not do, the teachers of the law and the Pharisees, that was the religious teachers of the day. That was the elite. Don't do what they do, for they do not practice what they preach. They tie up heavy, cumbersome loads, and they put them on other people's shoulders, but they themselves are not willing to lift a finger to move them. That right there, we could do a whole bunch as we, as followers of Jesus, like to get after, do this, come help me. Nah, I'm good. I mean, that's a call out right there from Jesus right there. If we're not going to put up, then let's shut up. That's basically what he's saying. Everything they do is done for people to see. They make their phylacteries wide and the tassels on their garments long. They love the place of honor at banquets and the most important seats in the synagogues. They love to be greeted with respect in the marketplaces and to be called rabbi by others. But you, and he's talking to his disciples because they were following the rabbi, training to be rabbis, you are not to be called rabbi, for you have one teacher, and you are all brothers. And don't call anyone on earth father, for you have one Father, and he is in heaven. Nor are you to be called instructors, for you have one instructor, the Messiah. In fact, he says, the greatest among you will actually be your servant. For those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. And then he goes off. Woe to you. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you, the word we do not want to hear, hypocrites. I mean, can you just imagine? Now, at that time, they probably didn't care, but now that we know who he is, to think about being called a hypocrite by Jesus. You know, a hypocrite means a fake. You play actor. They had in their mind those that would put masks on and act out a part. That's what he's calling them. You're faking it. You're playing a part. You shut the door of the kingdom of heaven in people's faces. You yourselves do not enter, nor will you let those enter who are not trying to. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You travel over land and sea to win a single convert, and when you have succeeded, you make them twice as much a child of hell as you are. Woe to you, blind guides! And we won't go through all of that. Let's go to 23. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You give a tenth of your spices, your mint, your dill, and your cumin, but you've neglected the more important matters of the law. In other words, I give my offering, I sacrifice, but you're neglecting justice and mercy and faithfulness. You should have practiced the latter without neglecting the former. But you blind guides, you strain out a gnat, but swallow a camel. And then these are the two that just really get me. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You clean the outside of the cup and dish, but inside they are full of greed and self-indulgence. Blind Pharisee, first clean the inside of the cup and dish, and then the outside also will be clean. And woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You are like whitewashed tombs, which look beautiful on the outside, but on the inside are full of the bones of the dead and everything unclean. In the same way, on the outside you appear to people as righteous, but on the inside you are full of hypocrisy and wickedness. Now, as I read this today, and we can keep going on, I encourage you to go back. I'm not reading this to call anybody out in here. That's not what I'm doing. I'm reading this to show you what matters to Jesus. We've turned, and I'm going to touch on this, we'll get into it more in the weeks ahead, but we've turned so much of this Jesus-following thing into so many things, we forget what matters to Jesus, which is basically him saying, I'm going to get to it again in a minute, I want you to relate with me and to live with me and love me as I love you and just be real about it. While I continue to work with you, in you, and through you. Because who he's getting after are those that acted like they had it all together. Those that were probably really good at judging and making sure everybody else knew they didn't have it right. Those that were really good at spouting off all the verses that they knew. That's why he said your phylacteries are wide and your tassels are long. You can spout, you can share, you can quote all kinds of stuff, but inside, nothing's changed. You're like whitewashed tombs. He's going, you're a hypocrite. And in the end, it's actually holding people, other people down as to what this is about with Jesus than actually helping them enter the kingdom and want to walk with him. Yesterday, the very first guy that spoke, we had two speakers at this, and I've asked him if he'll come share with us, but he's the pastor at Hope Community Church. There's Hope Chapel in Kansas City. There's Hope Community in Andover. For years, they've been known as the Biker Church. Their former, the founding pastor, I think his name is Mike anyway. They call him, I don't remember what they say they call him now, but he's just a bald-headed, long-bearded dude, now real laid down. But they used to have a ton of bikes that would show up because the bikers would come there. And they just said, hey, we're just loving everybody. That's what it's all about. And it's almost a little weird, because I went there one time and I saw it, but the more he explained it yesterday, but they have coffee cups that on the coffee cup it says, sinners welcome. And then as you walk into the building, there's a mat there that says, sinners welcome. And then in one of the drives up there, like when you go to a ranch and just has a sign over that, it says, sinners welcome. And he says he even has people that come to church and have been in the church for years that like to go in that drive as they drive up to be reminded of what it's all about. But they're all about sinners being welcome as well and having that mentality that's where we need to be, because he says the truth is the reason that people aren't coming to Jesus, you hear it over and over and over, and we like to push it aside and pretend like it's no big deal, is because of those who say they follow Jesus and don't. It's because of those who are telling you all these things that you're supposed to do and what it looks like and looking good and showing up on Sunday and dressing up and doing all this and putting on the show and singing worship and going and putting in the time. And then outside of that, in their conversations and the actions and the way they talk about people and the way we respond to people and all this kind of stuff, they don't feel welcome. And the number one place studies have shown where people feel welcome and at most concerned to enter into on a regular basis is the church. That's why there was that woman who was my landlord when I was living in an apartment in Portland, always talked about wanting, I was like a block from where the church building was. And she always talked about wanting to come over to the church and see where we worked because she just lived across that, but she was afraid that she wasn't allowed there. And I'm not kidding. I'm not making this up. I remember the one time I finally got to where she was willing to come over and see it. She walked over. She walked in the building. She started crying. And I said, "What's wrong?" She goes, "I'm just afraid God's going to strike me dead right now." Because that was her view of the church. Come on, let's just be real. Why would she have that view? Where did that come from? I mean, that nobody had that view when they came to Jesus. It was the religious leaders and the Pharisees and the ones that he was calling hypocrites that put that idea out there, that kind of a view, that kind of perspective, where people were afraid of that. Instead of just being real. And for Jesus, it hurts his heart. I think we can see this in here, that not being a fake, not being a hypocrite is important to Jesus to the point it actually seems to bother him and frustrate him. If someone is a representative of him and claims that they are, he wants them to actually represent him. He wants them to be real. He wants them to be honest. He wants them to be genuine. He came to start a revolution and a rise when authenticity is not present. People are done. It doesn't even have to be in the church. There are some politicians we will not follow and we will not agree with, and why is that? Because what they say and what they show, we go, that's not really them. It's not just in church. We are people that don't follow people that we think are fake. We don't become a part of that. We don't allow ourselves to get into that. So it's not just in the church. So it would make sense that in starting a revolution, and Jesus trying to bring a new kingdom, trying to show people hope, trying to show people love, trying to show people a purpose, trying to show people a future, he would want people to just be real. The ones that he called to be the ones to share this with others, he would want them to just be real. And I think there's many times in our lives where he puts us in a moment where the notification comes in, and he puts us in that thing, and he's saying, I just want you to be real, and here it is. Say what you're going to say. Do what you're going to do. Be real about your story. Be real about who you are. Don't try and just be real. And that's a challenge I want us to consider for the next few weeks as we go out as to whether or not we're actually going to be real. Because if we're not, people are not going to want to be a part of that. It won't matter how many times we gather, how beautiful our young people sing and lead in worship, how good our musicians are. It won't even matter if the preaching is good. If it's a place where the people are not real and they know that, and we live in a small town, guys. We're not even in a city where it can be somebody new. People know everybody. And if they know that they're not real, they've already made up their mind, I don't need to be a part of that. And sometimes they got it wrong, because sometimes they listened to something from somebody else that wasn't true. But that's going to keep it from happening. But we still live here. We're still called to make a difference here. God has us here, and it's going to be us being real. Not only that, whether or not we're willing to be real, and I'm especially talking to those of us who've been in the church for years and been following Jesus for years, sometimes when we're not real, it actually makes things more difficult for those who are trying to grow and learn and be who Jesus called them to be. It's kind of like what I said earlier, the Facebook effect. The pictures on Facebook, and they're discovering this more and more all the time, actually the reason it's creating anxiety and stuff is because they create an unreal pressure for other people to live up to. We've known this for years when it comes to modeling in magazines. We know that things are airbrushed, that the women don't look the way we really think they look if you saw them in person. We know that. Facebook is doing it now. We're just staging and posting pictures. And then somebody else is looking and going, something must be wrong with me. I'm not good enough. I can't live up to that. The thing that gets me, that I still just crack up on, though, is like in our posing pictures, and the reason, how many people truly walk around with fish lips all the time? Like, nobody sits there on every smile. I have not seen anybody smile with fish lips, but why do we do that? Like, when we're posing, it's not even a real smile. Like, if you seriously walked around to me and just had fish lips all the time, I'm going to just carry a bag of Swedish fish and be like, here you go. Take it. Have it. But it's put that on there. We're so posed, and it's so fake, but it's created that, which is why the app came out. But it's happened here, too, within the church. We have people that are afraid to serve in areas that they could be serving. We have people who are afraid to speak when they should be speaking. We have people who are afraid to pray when they could be praying, because they hear all this other spouting and long and good and everything else from people that are just as struggling and working through stuff and have their own issues, but it looks good there, and it's holding people back because we're just not being real before we get there. So it's not even just keeping people out of the church, it's keeping people down who are part of the church, who are part of that group that follows, part of the ecclesia, because we're just not being real. Casting Crowns calls it the stained glass masquerade. We're really good with that. But the heart of Jesus, as we read here, is just be real. It bothers him when we're not. And so for the next few weeks, we're going to dig in. And we're going to dig in to at least 4 aspects of being real. That is basically, I would say, required to be real. We're going to dig into the fact that being real means it's going to take a relationship with God and with others over just trying to follow the rules of our religion. It's kind of crazy how easy we get sucked into struggling with turning this relationship with God into rules to follow. But God has actually never been about him with rules to follow. Yes, he gave us commandments. That's how any relationship has boundaries and has things to do, but that's not what it's all about. Those are to help build the relationship. His ultimate desire, he told us, and we keep going, but his ultimate desire is love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, all your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. Relate. Just be in relationship, because he knows that rules without relationship just leads to rebellion. So we're going to look into that a little bit more. We're going to look at the need for a struggling but growing faith and trust in him. If we're going to be people that are willing to be real, it means we're going to have to trust him. That's partly why we don't. We don't be real because we aren't sure we can trust that he can take care of us. We don't really believe that he says those who humble themselves will be exalted. We struggle with that. And it makes sense because, again, we're just trained and taught to exalt ourselves and humble everybody else. But he says those who humble themselves will be exalted. We struggle with that. But to be real is going to require a growing, though struggling, relationship with him. I myself wish I had the faith of Abraham, who was, as morbid as it sounds, willing to sacrifice a son with the belief that God would provide. But I'm more like John the Baptist, if we were to just go on from where we were, who actually has to say, can you go ask him if he really is the one, a lot of times? I'm more like the guy whose daughter was demon-possessed, and he asked Jesus for help, and after Jesus says, hey, anything's possible for those who believe, says, I do believe, but help my unbelief. It doesn't have to be a perfect faith. It's still a struggling faith, but a growing. It's going to take that in order to be real. And we're going to dig into that some more. It's going to take an honesty and a vulnerability and a humility over looking like we have it all together or trying to save face, if we're going to be real. We're going to have to be willing to be honest and vulnerable and even humble. There's a book that I'm reading right now. He shares a story in there. He says that a couple came into his church. He was a pastor of a church. I think that's where they came in. And they once told him how proud they were that they'd never had a fight in their 25 years of marriage. And he says, that's really not something to celebrate. He said, because that's an indicator of a major problem. If you're not experiencing conflict, then you're not being honest in there. I hear a story like that, and I just go, yeah, right. 25 years, never had a fight. What that sounds more like to me is the person who has the hand raised and everything together and presents a perfect pose, and it's all good on a Sunday morning when there's really more going on. They're just not willing to share it because of what it looks like, and they want to save face. Only this isn't a marriage relationship instead. I'm sorry if any of you have been married 25 years, and I don't believe you if you've never had a fight. I know that 2 of you sitting back here never have, but everybody else, I think that's the case. We're going to have to be willing to be vulnerable and honest. And finally, it's going to take a genuine understanding of what God has done for us and who he says we are now, if we're going to be willing to be real. And at least those 4 things we're going to dig into, because it's his heart, it's his desire that those who follow him would be real. I don't know if the worship team's closing, if you're just going to play some, but if you'll come up, we're gonna close this. But the girls are looking around like, I don't know, what are we doing? You guys can sing anything. We're going to love you no matter what. There's a reason I shared with you at the very beginning and asked you a question and asked you to be real. Because even as we enter this place and this moment and this time together, it's important that we be real with each other. The truth is, we cannot love each other if we're not being real with each other. And we also can't actually let God heal and work through us if we're not being honest with others and with him. It just doesn't work. And it's not his fault. We're the ones pushing him away because we feel like we have to put on a pose. Like we have to put this on, and we're more into the Facebook mentality than the be real. And we're missing out, and others are missing out as well. So that's why I asked that, but it's also why I wanted to remind you that God loves you. Because in order to be real, we've got to start with that reality that God loves you. And he cares deeply for you. And if we don't believe that, we're going to struggle to be real. We'll be shiny. We'll look good. Cool things may happen. But it'll all be plastic that'll fall apart someday. Instead of just the real. That he can shape and mold and love and work in and work through. So I want to just read to you something, because maybe you're hearing this and going, man, I'm glad to hear this. Because for me, I've struggled with this, just living in it and experiencing it with me. But I want to read to you this invite. It's a paraphrase of a passage that Eugene Peterson wrote in his Bible, The Message. It says, are you tired? Are you worn out? Are you burned out on religion? If you haven't noticed that that's me right now, then you're not paying attention. Because I am. Been to 2 conferences now, just seeing stuff going on, and I'm just tired and tired of it. So Eugene asks this question, are you tired? Are you worn out? Are you burnt out on religion? He says, come to me. This is Jesus' words. Come to me. Get away with me, and you will recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. That's the actual invite of Jesus. Not all the stuff that he was calling out the Pharisees and the hypocrites and the teachers of the law. That's the invite of Jesus. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. But we will only genuinely experience this if we're just willing to be real. Be real. As you go today, as we get ready to head out, that's the challenge. Just be real. Our young people in school, just be real. School's hard, especially if you're a girl. If you're a guy, you just, well, I won't tell you what you do. You punch them, you flip them off, you do something, you move on. Guys just fight it out. Girls, man, it hangs on. And now I got a guy out of the house and I got a girl there and I don't understand anything. I grew up with 4 brothers and I realize it's hard. So I see these girls that are in school and I know the stuff that happens. And we want to protect ourselves. We want to fight for ourselves. Just be real. That'll take care of you. Those of you that are struggling with a coworker, that give you a hard time, that are in your ear, that might be even making fun of you, whatever, if they say, man, you're not good enough at whatever, shock them sometime and say, you're right, I'm not. Thank goodness Jesus still loves me. And I'm working on that. Just be real. Don't try and put on a pose. Man, those that are in businesses and stuff that just have to put on an image all the time, there's times that we just need to be real. And just say, yeah, I mean, we're going to smile, we're going to serve, we're going to be there. Man, sometimes life's tough, and it might actually make a difference in the life of somebody else because they realize, oh, wow, happens to them too. Just be real. And I just have a feeling that people might not just look at you different. They might see the church different, who's the representative of Jesus, and then they might ultimately go, oh, Jesus is pretty cool. If he's still loving you, he may still love me. But it means we just got to be real. So we'll spend some time in it. That's the challenge. God, I just pray that as we move forward, it's actually a little bit scary to think about being real, especially if we spent so long putting on a pose, pretending like we have it all together, pretending like we have all the answers, pretending like we don't ever screw up, or we don't do the wrong thing, or we don't think the wrong thing, or we don't, even just pretend like we've got it all figured out, and we know all the answers. It's a hard and scary thing to think about just being real in a moment and just going, yeah, I'm not there. I'm still struggling with that, or I don't understand that, or I don't get that, or even just to be able to say, it's just not been a good day. I'm struggling with today. It's hard and it's scary, but God, I just pray that you would help us to trust you enough that we would do it, that we would actually understand that you're going to pick us up, that you're going to carry us when things are really tough. And even if it feels like we're going to walk through a valley of the shadow of death, you're going to be right there with us. And that valley can feel like it comes out when we're just being real. But God, I definitely don't want what we saw Jesus say here to be said about anybody in here, in this group. But we don't want that. We want to be those that do represent you and help others see you too, because God, we know deep down that you've loved us. You've changed our lives. And you care about us so much. And those around us, we want them to experience that too. So help us just to be real. Each and every day, in the situations we're in, when the notification comes in, just be real. And then just show us what you're going to do through that. As we go into this week, God, I just pray protection over people with the heat, especially those that will be out in it a lot. Just watch over them. And God, we'll just pray for a break even. If you can tell the weatherman they're wrong and cool it off, we would really love you. In Jesus' name, amen. Have a good week, guys.